Now we are going through financial crisis. I mean, the Silicon Valley Bank and the Credit Suisse. But in 2008, we went through a real financial crisis, and I'm going to tell you more about that. Hi, I'm Marco Villenius, your traveling futurist, now shooting in Venice. Current bubble that we are dealing with when it comes to the finances and some of the financial institutions having the problem. A little bit like a repercussion of what happened in 2008, but not really. When 2008 financial crisis started to emerge, I was then working with the Allianz. Allianz is largest private insurance company, a German one. I was in the headquarters in Munich, and I was in this kind of a strategic division where we were looking at the outlook of the future. But suddenly this started to crash upon us, and not only us, but the whole world. What was astonishing at that time was that there were very few people who understand what is actually going on. Even if those people were the ones that were supposed to understand how the financial market works, what can be the likely outcomes, so that they would actually understand the system. Fast forward ourselves to the last week's developments, and what happened then? We have a Silicon Valley Bank, an institution that has been gathering together a lot of those type of assets, finances that has been created by different kinds of Silicon Valley ticon, the guys that has invented X and Y technologies. Now, this bank was one of those key banks that were actually lobbying for the Washington to alleviate and even demolish some of the financial regulation when it comes to the banks and when it comes to the solvency and sovereignty of the banks. So they were the ones that were really imposing this, that, well, less regulation is better. Now, afterwards, when they started to be in the trouble because a lot of the stuff, a lot of the deals that they had made proved to be something of the dubious kind. So they were not that strong and solid at their balance sheet. So what happened was that actually the customers started to notice that not everything is right there. So they started to withdraw their assets from the bank. And that was, as always, the kind of a movement where there are a couple of people first, then there are more, and then there are more, and then that becomes a crowd phenomenon. And everybody's doing that, and in that very moment, the bank is in great trouble. Now, there was this other thing about the Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse is the bank that has been a lot of what we could call the disorganized assets in the balance sheet. And they have been very troubled by that, but they had still been kind of moving forward because the general mood in the financial sector has been a little bit more positive than negative. Now there came a moment that actually there was a lot of disbelief and fears in the market, and it hit that very institution. And now we saw that UBS finally bought that institution with a very meager price. Now, all of these kinds of movements that we have seen happen in the 2008, but in a much larger scheme of things. If we say that this type of institution, particularly the Silicon Valley Bank, was very much connected to the cryptocurrencies, and there were also some other banks that were falling, like a Signature Bank, which is a much smaller bank in New York. All of those events were kind of piling up towards the same direction, namely that there are assets that are claimed and they have a value, but that value is not their real value. Exactly the same thing happened in 2008. This time it was much in the US housing market, but also some other markets, but the US housing market in particular, where there was suddenly a big boost of the prices and huge amount of money available for anybody to grab that without being forced to provide any kind of a collateral. Now that was a very dangerous, and that kind of a built up until the whole thing crashed down, like this in very famous Bernie Madoff's pyramid scheme. We were supposed to learn from that. We were supposed to learn, okay, we should not let that type of the escalation happening in the financial market. It's not good for anybody. Time and again we let that happen again. And this was exactly what happened with the current crisis. But if you look at the financial crisis back in 2008, it was also the sequence of events that preceded that crisis that really made it possible. And particularly I would like to elevate one person, which was Alan Greenspan, who was the chairman of Federal Reserves of the United States, and who was throughout his career very much convinced that less obligations, less regulation makes the market better. The markets are intelligent. But think about the markets where you have basically greedy bankers and you have no controls and checks. Would that never work? I guarantee not. At some point, this market will blow. Just simple fact of the physics, I would say, that will blow. That was the case of the financial market, but amazingly, in those days, there were very few experts who understood what was at stake. Actually, I know the only one, Nuria Rubini, the professor of economics in New York, who actually was able to capture that just because he had observed earlier what happened in the Asian markets back in 1990s, where similar kind of a collapse occurred, and he said, okay, well, this is happening now again, but in this time, it's at the core of our Western markets, namely in the United States. And when that crash happened, with the Lehman Brothers and some others kind of crashing completely the financial markets, what happened afterwards was that hush, 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 hush. There was not much of the investigation. There was not much of finding out those ones that were really inducing that, and being important institutions and persons to do that. They all were kind of given almost like a free ticket to move along, forget all about it. And that's what the financial market by and large did. And that is a part of the problem that we are facing today. I don't believe very strongly that this current crisis will escalate, but it's a nice warning that we should not actually allow too much of the liberalization of the market, just because when it comes to the money, people tend to be greedy and they tend to want more than what they deserve, and that creates a problem of its own. So for that sake, we need to have very strong control, balance and checks that the interest of the clients, the customers, the people, the citizens are the strongest, and not the interests of the capitalist, not the interest of the guys that are running these businesses. Of course, their needs have to be met as well, in such a way that it doesn't destroy the value, and it doesn't destroy the markets, and it doesn't destroy the common good. So the question now comes, when are we really learning this? What is the type of the lesson that help us to really to learn that we need to regulate the market in such a way that the common good is at the end there, at the end of the tunnel, so to say. And that's still a long way to go, and I haven't seen much of that debate happening. But I truly believe that it is in the USA, in the United States, where this revelation about how to control the market in such a way that we avoid these kind of traps. How do we avoid that? How do we make our markets working more smoothly, more firmly, and more with the interest of the common good? That's the key question. And And with these failures and mistakes that we've seen now, we hopefully are making that type of the key learnings that are helping us towards the future. Subscribe to my channel and see other finance related videos from there.